We are back here at Post Wrestling. And speaking of back, this man is making the return to the ring this coming Friday night for West Coast Pro Wrestling against Timothy Thatcher. I think longtime observers might remember that your first meeting in the ring, it was not Timothy Thatcher and Chris Hero, but rather Chris Hyde and Bryce Braxton Collins for
Oh, BBC.
Wrestling Retribution Project. That if you were not around in 2011, this is like the mysterious promotion that had so much intrigue behind it, taking existing wrestlers, putting them under new personas. You guys did like what, a couple days of tapings.
Yeah, like 4 days or so.
And they pretty much never saw the light of day until they were dumped on YouTube unedited years after the fact. But this had so much hype from Jeff Katz, and you were in the midst of this, and this would have been your first match with Timothy Thatcher.
Yeah, first time I had ever met him. I didn't, he was like a NorCal-based wrestler. I'm not even sure what his direct connection was to getting booked on those shows. I had met Jeff Katz years earlier, and he had talked about doing something, but those set of tapings were really important for me because I had signed with WWE, and because of my testosterone situation with the medical, they rescinded my contract. So I moved down to Tampa to start with FCW, and I wasn't able to start with FCW. So I was in this weird limbo of like, I've finished up with everybody that I'm working for, and now I have no money coming in. So it took me, if you look at it, it took me 5 months from the moment I moved to Tampa to actually starting with FCW. So that was like 5 months of limbo where I was able to get on a handful of shows. I did like a PWG, I did like a Final Battle appearance and a follow-up for ROH. But these tapings, 4 days, went to Hollywood, shot it like right by Jim Henson Studios. There's a statue of one of the dinosaurs from that dinosaur show, right?
Yeah.
Earl Sinclair, right, was right outside there. We were in this fancy place. And I got, 4 or 5 days of good pay when I really, really needed it. And then got to just see so many people from different areas of my career, people that I had met for the first time, people that I'd worked with for a very long time. And just, we got to be a part of this like special thing that like no one ever, there's like a group photo of all of us, but like people until the pandemic, none of that footage existed, or very limited bits of it. So it's like I was in a multi-man match with the Amazing Red, but he was not the Amazing Red, and it was just very limited. That's the only time I've ever been in the ring with him. But I wrestled Luke Gallows. I wrestled Chris Masters, Ken Doane, MVP, and they were all under different funky names. But it's just that week of tapings really came along when I was really hurting at that point. So I think back fondly to that week in LA.
At that point, are you looking at WWE as a completely closed door? Were there caveats that they said, hey, let's revisit this in 12 months? Like what's your sense of things that you're right there knocking at the door? You've moved to Florida.
I was told to not even come to the shows.
Wow.
Right. I was like, damn, I'd like to see people and say hi. And they're like, hey, you probably shouldn't. I was like, oh, cool. And that gets like depressing. You're like, oh my God, I just upped and moved and I was still paying rent on my place in Pennsylvania. I hadn't completely gotten rid of it yet. So it was just a lot. I was basically told, like, paraphrasing, like, hey, it's your issue, deal with it.
Wow.
Like, we don't know why you failed the physical. These are the numbers that we got. So I took it upon myself, and not to turn this into a whole story about that, but man, I went to like doctors and I messaged a ton of people. And it just was really hard. People either didn't know what to do, because it's this whole TE ratio thing, like your testosterone over your epitestosterone, right? And basically, if it's in a certain window, it throws up flags, right? But if it's in that window, like, you have to find out what your baseline is first, because I found a doctor, actually an incredible doctor from the World Anti-Doping Agency, this guy, Dr. Don Catlin from UCLA, who did not know me, who responded to my email, pointed me in the right
Like
direction.
Don Catlin is like a powerhouse.
Yes.
Like a major figure in all
Yes.
of this.
So I've still never met Don in person, but he actually helped me figure this out. I had to find out what the frick a carbon isotope ratio. Is that what it is?
Carbon isotope ratio test.
Yes. Yeah. So I had to figure out what that was and then figure out what endogenous and exogenous, like all these things that I don't know anything about. And then I got that test and then gave it to WWE and said, hey, look, this is coming from my body. It's not coming from outside of my body. And they were like, oh, okay, cool. And they set me up with another physical. I went back to Pittsburgh, did the physical again. And they said, you failed the physical. And I'm like, no shit. Like, that's the whole point. So after, working my way through that a little bit, they set up a different set of parameters for me. And then I was able to start. But it was just this, I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't know if something was wrong with my body. It made me nervous to take any kind of a pre-workout or protein or just, I didn't know what the hell was going on. So that's why I had 5 months of purgatory. Claudio and I are coming in together, and then he gets a 5-month head start on me, the jerk. And, he just passes with flying colors. And then I get there, and then Dr. Tom's on his way out. I'm like, So so it was, when I think of Wrestling Retribution Project, I think of, wow, I was having a really hard time. And people speak poorly of those tapings because, I think a lot of people put money into that and never saw any return on it. I don't know the exact details of it, but it upset a lot of people. But
there was just so much hype around it. Like, Jeff Cap did a great job of selling the concept. You just had a lot and some really interesting names. This is, Kenny Omega, when a lot of wrestling fans are,
was he Scott Carpenter?
Oh, some of the names here, like Father Dante, Concrete, Punchline, Stan Shooter. I mean, they were just like all brand new names. Chris Hyde, of course.
Chris Hyde.
Ferris Gotch.
Wow. Yeah. And man, every now and again, that'll come up in a locker room conversation. We're like, what a weird, crazy time that was. And this was, for the listeners, this was like a precursor to Lucha Underground, because that's what he wanted it to be. He wanted it to be episodic, weekly on Netflix, but it just it was not. And you can watch the footage back and go, oh, there's something there, but it's not. That's not it.